So many people I know who use AI, ask it questions, and think that the results that they get back is the answer. And it seems like people are more interested in getting an answer that can allow them to stop thinking about the question than really finding out what the real answer is. I'm so interested in what AI really can know based on what is and not what we tell it we think it is.
Here today to discuss Rick's new album, The Way of Code. Rick, what is The Way of Code?
The Way of Code is a book about vibe coding. And it's a book about vibe coding by way of a 3,000-year-old spiritual text called the Tao Te Ching, written by Lao Tzu. So it's an interesting, the idea of a 3,000-year-old wisdom teaching combined with cutting-edge technology. That's what The Way of Code is. And the subtitle is The Timeless Art of Vibe Coding. And I like the idea of the timeless art of vibe coding, considering the term vibe coding is maybe 10 weeks old.
Yes.
I felt we now have the timeless art of something 10 weeks old is interesting to me.
So here it is. And it's weird to hear you call it a book, because when you first sent me the link and I started reading it, it felt like I was using software. So why do you call it a book versus a website or an app or the many other things you could have described it as?
Well, I wrote it as a book. It started as a book. And then I happened to meet, I invited Jack Clark onto the Tetragrammaton podcast, and I recorded with him. The episode's not out yet, but we recorded about 3 weeks ago, and I had just finished the book. And after the podcast, I said, I wrote this book. Do you want to check it out? And he looked at it and he said, I feel like there's a way we could do something with this, build it into a website, and have a way to demonstrate vibe coding within the website. So that's how the website came about.
Gotcha. Well, it feels kind of poetic for it to be vibe coding and have built-in vibe coding with each verse.
The idea of, originally, the Anthropic people said, could you give us a list of prompts to create the art? And I said, I think the art would be best created using the text of the book to create the art. And then we can give it mods to modify the art. And we'll suggest some mods, but you can also make up your own mods. So you can say, I want it to look like it was painted by Cezanne, or I want it to look like it's melting, or I want it to look like, what's the Nordic version look like? And it'll do those things. Or what's the Technicolor version? Or make it spin fast or make it spin slow. You can ask it to make whatever changes you'd like it to.
So my head was exploding when I saw this, because it felt like watching the art of remixing music, which I've heard, Ben talk about many, many times before as the heart and soul of hip hop, right? Sampling. That's the first thing that I saw when that it evoked for me when I read this. Is that where the idea came from?
All art is a version of sampling and remixing. It doesn't start from zero. We come in empty. We feed back based on what's coming at us. And that's what all artists do. So remixing is kind of what all art is. We know it very specifically in the hip hop world, but that's really when the Beatles listened to Roy Orbison and then wrote Please Please Me based on his Roy Orbison's Please song. That was remixing. It's always been that.
And why do you think there's kind of such strong resistance to kind of this version, this kind of remixing? So both with sampling and vibe coding to a large extent, like a lot of people got very upset that, it stopped being done the old way. Like, here's this new version of the thing that we all do.
I think there's a misconception that the computer now does the work. But really, the computer it's another tool. It's like a guitar or a sampler, or It's another tool in the artist's arsenal. But the reason we go to the artists we go to, or the writers we go to, or the filmmakers we go to, is for their point of view. The AI doesn't have a point of view, right? Its point of view is what you tell it. What you tell it the point of view is to be. So you can have a script, a great script for film, and you give it to 5 great directors, and you'll get 5 very different movies. It's true with everything. If you give the same song to different artists, they interpret it differently. So AI gives you the ability to take your ideas, feed it into this machine, and then get back different iterations that normally you would do, but it would just take you much longer. It's more of a modeling process.
Yeah.
If you understand it as you're not just asking it to make art, you're asking it to bring your dreams to life in the same way that you would in a wood shop. Say it's the same thing. It's just another tool for you as the artist to make the thing that you want to make. If you think it's doing it, it's only doing what you're telling it to do. And all it knows is what other people have told it to do. It doesn't have any of its, I don't know that it has any of its own thoughts yet. And I don't know if it's possible. I feel like the real strength of it would be if it could have its own thoughts. Yeah. It seems like the companies that control this really want to keep it to the way humans do things.
Yeah. Well, and that's, currently that's the current state of the art for sure. So in a sense, it's like a guitar or a pen or anything that you would create art with. It's just at a different level. We went through this in computer science early on, where it used to be machine coding. We called it machine coding, which we did with punch cards. And you would basically instruct the machine on okay, move this bit, from here to there, and these kinds of things, and jump to this line in the program and so forth. And then we got to higher level programming. And there was great resistance, by the way, from the kind of people who are great at assembly code, because they said, well, that high level programming is so inefficient. Like, how could you waste all those computer cycles? It's horrible. At every step of the way, I think the crafts people at the prior generation of tools get a little upset about the kind of new generation of tools.
The beauty of this tool is that for those of us who are not coders and those of us who are not technical,
most of the world,
we can now play in that sandbox where before there was this barrier, learn to code. You don't need to learn to code anymore. So that's the beauty of it. It democratizes it and makes it for everybody.
Yeah. No, quite amazing. The other thing that I thought was great about the art of vibe coding is it kind of, you kind of give a philosophy for what a human is, in a way that I think a lot of people are questioning now. So it's like, well, if we can't, write marketing collateral, or we can't, code, what's our purpose? And you get kind of deep into that. And how do you think about that, I guess?
Well, I think that's the reason I chose the Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching to base it on, because the Tao Te Ching is how to live, how to be. It's the way. The translate way. Yeah. So the way of code is, it's talking about how to be in life, and it's a grounding. And I'm imagining so many of the people who are coders probably have never read the Tao Te Ching. So, and the coders will likely be the people who are designing our future. So if this is an opportunity for the people who are designing our future to get in touch with the 3,000-year-old truth of how to create balance in life and on the planet, that seems like a really good thing.
Yes. Yeah, no doubt. It's funny because I have read the Tao Te Ching, but only because I have a friend who's a professor of Chinese who did a translation. And I was like, oh, well, I'll read that. But it was pretty cool to see it come back to life in kind of such a modern and also a nicely kind of condensed way where, you pulled out the best parts. So it was super enjoyable to read.
So my experience was 10 weeks ago or so, I heard this phrase vibe coding. I don't know what it is. I don't know about anything in that world. And then the next week I saw an image of me related to vibe coding, and I'd never seen that image. I thought it was an AI image. It turned out to be a real photograph, just one I'd never seen. I'm wearing headphones and I had my hands on a mouse, and it was in Germany at a hi-fi convention, and I was listening to those headphones very closely. My eyes were closed, and the mouse was controlling the volume. And that's what I was doing in the photograph. And somehow the hive mind picked that image to be associated with vibe coding, and I started seeing it used thousands of times. And then the following week, there's a company called Cursor, which I don't really know what they do, but it seems to be something to do with coding.
Yes.
You had the 15 rules of vibe coding, and my picture was at the top. And I thought, it's just so strange. This is my understanding of the world somehow been enlisted in this. And then the question was, okay, obviously the universe is pulling me into this. And how do I participate? What's my role? What am I supposed to do now? I thought, well, the first thing I did was I wrote a tweet, because I do these tweets every day that are philosophical thoughts. And it was the first time I ever did a joke tweet. And the joke tweet read, tools will come and tools will come. Tools will come and tools will go. Only the vibe coder remains. And it performed well. And this is really resonating. Typically, maybe 20 times or 50 times response to the typical tweets. Like, something's going on here. There is something here. And then I thought, okay, that's a step involved. What would be more interesting than writing a book about something I don't know anything about? That'd be interesting. Yeah. Do that. And again, as a joke, vibe coding for idiots. But when the idea of using the DAO as the basis for it, the DAO is really serious. So even though
very serious, yes.
Very serious. It started as a joke. When the DAO became the backbone of it, it got profound. And, it surprised me. And I realized this can actually do something good. And then it happened very quickly, and now you get to play with it now.
Yeah, no, it was funny, I actually found it grounding for myself, which is a remarkable achievement, I think, given I think about this all day. One thing that I wanted to ask you is a thing that happened in music, kind of in the transition from the kind of, I would say, the virtuosity era of the kind of 70s and early 80s going into kind of a little bit both punk rock, but then into hip hop, was there was like this, when you didn't have to be a virtuoso, the energy of the music became completely different. And you got these whole different kind of sounds, ideas, everything. But you seeing something similar with vibe coding, where like software is going to be a whole different experience now?
It's the same idea of the democratization of a technology. So in the past, for music, you had to go to the conservatory and study for years and years, and then someday you could play in a symphony. And then when punk rock came along, you could maybe learn 3 chords in a day. And then there were all these bands, and that made it everybody. And that was how I started in music, was punk rock. If you had something to say, you could say it. You didn't need the expertise or skill set other than your idea and your ability to convey it. And vibe coding is the same thing. It's the punk rock of coding.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of, it's very exciting to me for kind of the generation that we were kind of during the hip hop era. Like for the people, like it's exciting, if you're our age, but if you're 20, it's a whole new world. Like, oh wow, we're going to build a whole new world. So, I am like super fired up about that part of it. And the way of the vibe coder kind of like cements that, where like, okay, why are we here? Well, we're, we're part of the things that matter in this universe.
I like the idea of making the code do what it doesn't want to do, where it wouldn't naturally go. It's not the most obvious thing. The first thing you get back will probably be the most obvious version. But when you see the most obvious version, it might give you ideas of what you could suggest to get something that's a little more interesting, maybe more subversive, which is what most art tends to be.
Right. Well, and it's a whole new palette, which, for an artist, it's very hard to work. Like if you have to be better than or newer than or more interesting than Michelangelo at sculpting, that's very, very hard. But if you've got a whole new tool set, then there is no precedent. You're kind of really free to express yourself.
I think the biggest disconnect that I feel myself is that it's such a strong tool that can do so much. We need some examples of some of the different things it can do. Now we'll see it can make animation that looks like your favorite cartoon, and then you see a million people doing that. But that's one idea. I want to see all of the things it could do to understand what's possible instead of just, I'm going to get it to do the same thing everyone else is getting it to do.
Yeah.
I think it's beyond our scope to understand what it actually can do. And I'm looking forward to some of the people who push the boundaries to see what it can do. And demonstrate for us and give us, because if you see someone who pushes it in one direction, it opens a door or a window to say, oh, it can go that way. So maybe I can make it go this way too. And no one's ever done that. And you can see where those boundaries are and continue pushing to see how far it can be stretched.
So relationship between art and audience. And of course, people in the art world, music world have struggled with this for a very long time, which is I create my truly individualized art and the audience doesn't like it, doesn't want it. Like, was it the right art to create? Was it still good art? Does art require an audience? And to your point, Rick, like, in the abstract, you could maybe as an artist, tell yourself that, if I create art and nobody likes it and nobody buys it, that it's still my art. But art is a commercial enterprise, right? If somebody's going to make their living as an artist, if they really want to reach people and they really want to change culture and have an impact on the world, right? The audience does at some point need to take it up. And so there's some sort of deep, I think, underlying relationship that in part is just commercial interest, but also is like for art to really take, it needs an audience. Then I'll let you comment on that in a second, but like startups, we think about this a lot, which is like, okay, for a startup to do its thing, to bring a new technology to market or to realize a vision of a founder, like it's a complete waste of time if the market never wants it, right? Because then you just have a prototype that sits on a shelf somewhere and like, nothing has ever happened. And so it's like, there is a synergistic feedback loop. There is some sort of concordance that needs to happen between the creator and the audience. Like the audience does need to buy in. A lot of what we think about in startup world is the legitimate startup ideas may sound like, they're, kind of crazy, but, when they succeed because they provide something that the customer base, never realized they wanted. But when they see it, they're like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. I want that. Right. And so the way I would describe what Ben said is the startup founders that are overly trying to appeal to what they believe the audience wants can get themselves confused and can end up with something the audience actually doesn't want. But if they get to the true underlying idea, they get to something truly, original and creative, then they unlock something in the customer base the customer base didn't know that it wanted. Would you describe the same thing? Does the same thing happen in music? Is that what happens, or more generally, like what is the nature of the relationship between the artist and the audience?
I would say the best artists tune into what they feel and they present that. And the ones who connect are the ones where the audience feels what the artist feels. If the artist is changing what they do to try to get the audience, it undermines the whole thing. It's the same as you guys asking a startup to change what they do for the market. It's the same thing. The best always comes when the artist is being true to themselves, doing their best work. And that means not every artist succeeds, but the ones who succeed are the ones where they're true to themselves And the thing that they're doing that's true to themselves connects with the audience. And it may be a while. I interviewed Richard Prinz recently, the fine artist, and he was an unsuccessful artist living in New York City for 20 years. And then something happened where someone bought some of his paintings for, I think, $50. And now, I don't know, 20 years after that, his rephotography, it's called, might sell it off for $60 million. But for 20 years, no one bought one piece of his art.
Yeah.
It happens when it happens. He always stayed true to what he was doing. And then all of a sudden, people came around. Van Gogh, I don't think ever sold a painting during his lifetime, but he was true to himself. And now we go to a museum and we get to see Van Gogh. So the market is almost like a secondary aspect where sometimes it catches on, sometimes it doesn't. And I would say maybe some of the greatest artists who ever existed, we've never seen their work, because it's a piece of that puzzle, which is the ability to live in the world and promote their work and show their work. Like there are some great musicians who are homeless. They don't have what it takes to be able to go on a 300-date tour. It's being a professional musician is a grueling life. So you can be super talented, but if you don't have the work ethic side of it down, then that's not going to work either. It's both the talent, the inspiration, the stars aligning, and the ability to want to break through the walls that you need to break through in these competitive fields. All of those things have to come together. And a lot of it's out of our control. You know, the parts that are in our control is we can work hard, we can show up, we could do our best and be willing to do whatever it takes for it to work. But that still doesn't guarantee that it works.
Right. So there's a thing in music, tell me if this is true, there's a sort of cliche in music, which is every artist's first hit album is the result of, 20 years of, artistic creativity and, evolution and original thinking and new ideas and new styles and, kind of the thing that makes them, kind of break through, some new thing. Like that's album number one. And then album number two is always about life on the road.
It's often the case.
Right, because all of a sudden, to your point, like that is their life.
It's also possible that an artist has had a hard life and then found success and their life changes and now they live in luxury and they can't tap into that energy that what they were struggling against. The struggle was their art and now they're not struggling anymore.
Let's take everything that you guys have said on these topics as true. Let's just assume this is all correct, which I think it is. Then the advice that gets applied, and you hear this a lot in startup world. The advice gets applied is, follow your passion. Screw the doubters. The doubters are wrong. Don't market test things. Don't worry about the audience. Don't worry about the market. Like, just do the thing that you think you're on planet Earth to do. You could argue that that's good advice because it gets people down this path, like Rick, of like what you do with artists, to kind of discovering authenticity. You could also argue, though, there's like a degenerate version of that advice, which basically is like, just be narcissistic, just be completely self-absorbed and, just do things for yourself and, just like completely disregard the entire concept of an audience. Like what's the dividing line when sort of advice that derives from these ideas is actually like good advice versus at what point is it just actually encouraging people to become insufferable, and sort of to unplug from the things that they would need to do to actually find an audience?
I believe that the audience comes last and the artist should be true to themselves. And that ultimately is in service to the audience. The audience is best served when they get the real version of you. If you start watering down the real version of you to do what they want,
right, it's
a recipe for disaster.
But that said, some of the best, like in movies, like some of the best directors do extensive, they will do testing. Like, they'll make the movie, they will test it, they will take the audience feedback because it just turns out like when they see the audience react to what they've made, they realize things about it that causes them to improve it. Like, is that I was going to say, so is that a legitimate, like, what's the line between that and what you're trying to get them to not do?
Well, sometimes you'll have a director show a movie to an audience and realize problems with it and work on them. And there are other times that they'll show a movie to an audience and the audience hates it. And those movies go on to be great hits. So there is no hard and fast rule. It's like, did they show it to the right audience? Not everything is for everybody. That's another part of it. It's like, how do you get to the audience that's the right audience for the thing that you're making?
There's a famous story. That was one more thing. So there's a famous story from the making of Blazing Saddles, and I don't know if it's true, but if it's not, it should be. Yeah. Which is Mel Brooks made Blazing Saddles, and he screened it for the executives, I think, at Warner Brothers, and it was like nobody laughed. They sat there in stunned silence. They were completely horrified, and like they were just like, "This thing is a train wreck. Like this is horrible." And then they did a follow-up screening with the assistants and the secretaries, and who just like were howling with laughter the entire way through. And so, yeah, now, I guess maybe the claim or the critique on this would be, yes, if you're Mel Brooks and you've made Blazing Saddles, it's fine to have test screenings in which nobody laughs. Yeah. But like, your median filmmaker who does that has probably actually really truly shit the bed.
But how do you know? Again, how do you know?
Yeah, how do you know? Yeah. So I've got a somewhat refined answer to your question, Mark. So there was a band that had a great name called Soul to Soul, and the reason it's a great name is because that's kind of what music is, from my soul to your soul. And so, as an artist, if it doesn't come from your soul, or as an entrepreneur, it's never going to work. Now, there may be an alignment thing to getting it exactly to land. But if you compromise the original thing, then you're just a wreck. And actually in entrepreneur world, like we saw this with Databricks, where like they had a very clear vision of what they were going to be, and the audience wanted it on premise. And they refused to do it because it was so contrary to their vision. But they still, they still had to do a lot of work to understand the customer needs over time. But like the core idea they had was like, it had to be in the cloud. And I think that, when you compromise the core thing in kind of entrepreneurship at art, which is like, this is the thing that I really, really feel, then it's always going to be bad. Like there's no way to make that good after the fact by listening to feedback.
But Ben, the tension I find there, let's say I'm going to channel being my dark founder days, when you're in the middle of the idea maze, you've got something that you believe the world needs, but you read Mark's product market fit, definition, and you stare at it in tears because it's not resonating, right? You've put out what you think the world needs, but it's not resonating. Is the answer to reconcile what Rick is saying and what you're saying, which is you can't compromise what matters, and yet or reconcile what Mark was saying is you've got to when you're building for a customer, you've got to change everything about it before you have product market fit until you find it. Is the answer that you just have to care really authentically about a type of person you want to serve, and then exceed their expectations? And what's authentic and true is that you care deeply about some particular person in the world who you want to serve, because your job is to build a product or a service, or in the case of a musician, to serve humanity by evoking a feeling or helping someone when they listen to your hip hop record to lift them up and give them the pep they need to go about their day. Is the answer that you have to be in service of somebody else to ultimately serve yourself?
I can say that it's so simple that you're serving people like you. You're the audience. You're making your favorite thing. You're in love with it. And then other people who like the things you like will like it. Thing other than that is some sort of mind reading. It's some sort of like fiction. You can't know what anyone else is going to think or like or do. If you taste some food and you love it, you're excited. You guys got to taste this. It's so good. And you'll either like it or not. But there's no better judge. I can't taste food and say, this tastes terrible to me, but I think you're really going to love it. It's impossible way to live.
Right. It's funny. We don't really have a positive word for narcissism.
Yeah.
Or solipsism is the other, solipsism is self-absorption, like self-absorption.
Self-knowledge. know oneself.
To know oneself.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is a very deep thing. It's an extremely deep concept. It takes you a lifetime to do sometimes, Yeah. But you're right. It is generally frowned upon by society.
Ben, it seems like that's the future of education. If expertise matters less and less, what matters more and more is taste and being in touch with yourself and this kind of self-knowledge. And so how do we think about that, Rick, in terms of sort of the future of education in a world where the skills that you have, i.e. sort of the lack of skills in certain areas, but a high regard of taste is just more important?
Yeah, it seems like taste and curiosity and open-mindedness is where it's at, and that's what I don't know. I don't remember ever learning anything in school that was helpful to me at any point in my life.
You and Mark have that in common.
My takeaway is basically that you're saying we've got to vibe with ourselves when using these tools. And watching and reading The Way of Code is basically a window into watching how you, Rick, vibed with yourself in the creation of this.
It's, again, a 3,000-year-old manual on how to vibe with yourself. That's what it is.